This thing looks like it was designed to survive the end of the world, and still have a wine fridge when it gets there. What you are looking at right now is not a military vehicle. It is not an armored transport. It is not a concept from a defense contractor. It is a motorhome, a luxury motorhome concept. And the moment that registers, the moment your brain reconciles the silhouette with the idea of someone waking up inside it, making coffee, watching the sunrise over a mountain range they drove themselves to, that is exactly the moment this design becomes genuinely fascinating. Before we go any further, full transparency up front. This is an AI-generated concept design. No factory, no production line, no showroom. No one is building this and no one is selling it. It is pure imagination rendered with extraordinary precision. And honestly, that is exactly what makes it worth analyzing. When you remove real-world constraints, you see what design could become. And what this designer imagined is unlike anything I have covered on this channel. Here is what we are doing today. We are walking the exterior in full, because there is a lot happening on these panels and most people will miss it. Then we are going inside, and even without interior renders, I am going to walk you through exactly what I think is almost certainly happening in that habitable space based on what the exterior is telling us. Then powertrain and tech. And then the verdict, where I will tell you the one decision on this concept I think is genuinely a mistake, and the one detail I would point to in any serious design school critique. There is also something happening at the rear roofline of this vehicle that I have not seen on any expedition concept before. I am saving it. We will get there. Let's go. The front of this concept does not ask for your attention. Commands it. Look at that face. The entire forward fascia is built on hard angular geometry, chamfered planes stacked and overlapped in a way that reads almost architecturally. This is not the rounded, approachable nose of a European luxury coach. This is not the aerodynamic softness of a Nisman plus Bischoff or an Orion. This is a face that communicates one thing before the vehicle moves a single meter. I go where roads end. The headlight clusters are embedded into the corners of the fascia as angular cutouts, backlit in a cool white that traces the geometry of the surrounding panels. It is a lighting signature, not just illumination. The designer understood that on a vehicle this aggressive in proportion, the lighting had to be equally precise. Otherwise, the face reads as brutal rather than intentional. That distinction matters. Brutal is cheap. Intentional is expensive. The geometric diamond emblem centered on the front fascia appears twice, here and on the side body, and that repetition tells you something about the brand language this concept is building. It is not random. It is a visual system. Whoever generated this image was thinking about identity, not just shape. What does this front face say to you before the vehicle moves? It says, the person behind this will choose not to blend in. Everywhere. In every context. On every surface. That is a very specific psychological statement for a motorhome to make. Step back and take in the full silhouette. This concept sits on what appears to be a six-wheel platform, 3 axles, 6 massive all-terrain tires, and that single decision changes everything about the proportions. The body length, based on the wheel diameter as a scale reference, suggests we are looking at something in the range of 11 to 13 meters. That is long wheelbase territory. That is the kind of length that gives a habitable interior enough zone separation to feel like a proper living space rather than a corridor with a bed at the end. The roofline is where this design earns serious credibility. It does not arc. It does not curve gracefully toward the rear the way most luxury coaches do. The steps. There is a distinct raised section above what I estimate to be the living and sleeping zones, adding meaningful ceiling height exactly where you need it, and then a slightly lower forward section over the cockpit. That is not accidental. That is a deliberate decision to prioritize interior volume in the habitable zones, while maintaining a more aggressive, low-slung profile over the driver's position. The glass-to-body ratio along the side is worth discussing. The windows are large, genuinely large, but they are framed within the angular panel geometry in a way that makes them feel like features rather than openings. Dark-tinted, flush-mounted, almost black in this lighting. They communicate privacy as much as they communicate view. You can see out. The world cannot see in. For a vehicle designed for expedition travel, for remote locations, wild camping, off-grid living, that is the right call. The body finish is a two-tone execution. Deep matte black and what reads as a warm gunmetal or dark champagne on the structural panel inserts. That combination is doing something sophisticated. The black recedes visually, making the vehicle feel more contained, more intentional. The champagne panels catch the light and reveal the geometry. You only understand the full complexity of this shape when the light moves across it. Now, I want to address something that some viewers will immediately question when they look at this concept. This does not look aerodynamic. It looks like a box with opinions. And here is the thing, at expedition speeds, that is not necessarily a problem. The aerodynamic penalty of angular geometry becomes significant above 100 kilometers per hour. For a vehicle whose primary use case is low-speed off-road traversal, river crossings, mountain passes, remote terrain, drag reduction is less critical than structural integrity, ground clearance, and approach angle. The flat panels, the vertical surfaces, the hard edges, these are not failures of aerodynamic thinking. They are the correct trade-off for a vehicle with this mission profile. What the designer has done, and this is subtle, is angle the major body planes slightly inward as they rise. The vehicle is actually narrower at the roofline than at the widest body panel. That taper reduces crosswind instability at highway speeds without compromising the aggressive stance at ground level. It is a small thing. It is the right thing. 6 massive all-terrain tires. Hex-patterned custom rim design with what appears to be beadlock detailing. The tire sidewalls are tall, high-profile rubber, not the low-profile performance aesthetic you see on road-biased luxury vehicles. This is off-road specification, and it is unambiguous. The stance, the height of the body relative to the wheel diameter is aggressive. This vehicle sits high. The approach and departure angles that geometry creates would allow access to terrain that would simply stop a conventional luxury coach dead. That is the point. That is the entire design philosophy sitting right there in the suspension travel and the tire choice. Here is what I want you to hold onto as we move inside. Everything on this exterior is communicating a specific living philosophy. This is not a vehicle for campgrounds and hookups. This is a vehicle for places where no one else goes. So the question becomes, what kind of interior do you build for a person who chooses that? Let's find out. Based on the habitable length I estimated from the exterior, somewhere between 9 and 11 meters of actual interior space after the cab section, here is how I think this concept divides its floor plan. The cockpit occupies the forward roughly 2 meters. Behind that, a transition zone, probably a small lounge or seating area that functions as the visual separation between the driving environment and the living environment. Then the main living area, taking the widest and tallest section of the body. Then the kitchen, positioned midship for structural stability of the appliance integration. Then sleeping quarters toward the rear, positioned above the rear axle zone. And at the very back, the bathroom. That sequence, cockpit, lounge transition, living, kitchen, bedroom, bathroom, is the most logical zone progression for a vehicle at this length. And it is the layout almost every serious expedition build at this scale converges on. Because it works. This is where I think this concept earns its most interesting interior moments. The side glass I described on the exterior, those large, dark-tinted, flush-mounted panels, those are not just visual features from outside. From inside, they are the view. And the view, at the locations this vehicle is designed to reach, is the entire point. Dawn over a volcanic ridge. Sunset across a salt flat. A thunderstorm developing over a mountain range 80 kilometers away. The glass is not an aesthetic decision. It is an experiential decision. It is the product. The amber lighting visible through the windows in the render suggests warm temperature interior LEDs, probably in the 2700 to 3000 Kelvin range. That temperature is not accidental. Cool white lighting in a space designed for relaxation is a hospitality design error. Warm light triggers a physical sense of comfort. Whoever thought about the exterior lighting thought about the interior lighting too. A vehicle at this positioning does not have a galley kitchen. It has a kitchen. Based on the body width, which I estimate at somewhere between 2.4 and 2.6 meters of interior usable width, there is enough lateral space for a proper island configuration or at minimum a full width counter with appliances integrated flush. I would expect induction over gas in this concept. Not because gas does not work in a motorhome, but because a concept built around a potential electric powertrain, which we will discuss shortly, integrates induction more coherently. Induction also eliminates the combustion risk and the ventilation requirement in a sealed, thermally managed living environment. Storage will be substantial. The exterior side panels showed what appeared to be external storage bays. That tells me the designer was deliberately keeping internal floor space clean. What would otherwise be utility storage is pushed to the exterior. The interior stays livable. The sleeping zone at the rear of a motorhome this length has one significant advantage over shorter concepts. Distance from the cockpit. You are physically separated from the driving environment. There is habitable space between you and the road. That psychological separation changes how a sleeping space feels. The bed orientation, based on typical rear section geometry in a six-wheel platform at this width, is almost certainly transverse. Width across rather than length along. That gives you a bed width that would comfortably accommodate a proper king-size mattress, and it allows both occupants to exit without climbing over each other. That detail, bed orientation, and exit logic is the difference between a space that works on a Tuesday morning and one that is tolerable once a week. Water management in an expedition motorhome is the design constraint that most concepts handle poorly. Fresh water capacity, gray water containment, black water management. These are engineering problems that cannot be wished away with renders. In a vehicle at this scale, with the exterior dimensions we are working with, I estimate fresh water capacity in the 400 to 600 liter range is plausible. That supports genuine off-grid self-sufficiency measured in weeks rather than days. A walk-in shower is architecturally feasible in a body this wide. Whether the designer intended one, I cannot confirm, but the geometry permits it. This is where I want to come back to that raised forward roofline detail. The cockpit on this concept, based on the windscreen angle and the fascia geometry, appears to position the driver significantly higher than a conventional motorhome. Not bus height, but elevated. That elevation, combined with the near-vertical windscreen plane, creates a driving visibility envelope that is genuinely unusual. You are not looking through glass at a slight downward angle the way you do in most coaches. You are looking forward, almost level over the hood. In off-road terrain, that visibility difference is meaningful. You can see what your front wheels are approaching. I would expect full digital instrumentation, a heads-up display integrated into the windscreen, and some level of autonomous highway capability, not full self-driving, but the kind of adaptive cruise and lane keeping that allows a driver to manage a 13-meter vehicle on a long interstate run without the cognitive load accumulating into dangerous fatigue. There is one more thing about this cockpit I will address in the verdict. I am not done with it yet. If this were ever engineered for reality, the powertrain question resolves in one direction almost immediately: full electric. Here is the logic. A vehicle at this positioning, this price point, this design philosophy, this mission profile is not being sold to buyers who are compromising. The person who commissions something like this is not tolerating diesel noise in their sleeping quarters at 2 a.m. when the generator kicks in. They are not tolerating the vibration. They are not tolerating the fuel logistics in remote territory. Electric propulsion eliminates all three problems simultaneously. Battery capacity in a real-world build scenario would need to be substantial. We are talking about a vehicle that likely weighs somewhere in the 12 to 16-ton range fully loaded. The energy requirement for meaningful range at that weight is significant. In a near-future production scenario, drawing on the battery architecture of heavy electric coach platforms currently in development, you are looking at a 600 to 800 kilowatt-hour pack to deliver 400 to 500 kilometers of range. That is not science fiction. That is slightly ahead of now engineering. The solar roof panel array visible in the render, and this is important, is not a range solution. Do not misread it as one. At the surface area available on a roof this size, solar generation realistically contributes 3 to 5 kilowatts of continuous output in ideal conditions. That is not enough to drive the vehicle. It is more than enough to run the interior systems, climate, lighting, water heating, refrigeration, connectivity, indefinitely in off-grid conditions. The solar is a self-sufficiency tool, not a propulsion tool. That is the correct use of it. The six-wheel platform with 3 axles almost certainly implies dual-motor, multi-axle drive distribution. In practical terms, that means the torque delivery to each driven axle can be managed independently, which is exactly what you need when one axle is on solid ground and another is on loose shale or deep sand. Torque vectoring between axles is what separates a vehicle that can navigate difficult terrain from one that merely looks like it can. Smart systems, climate that learns your patterns, predictive route charging, connectivity that maintains signal in genuinely remote locations via satellite integration. These are not futuristic in 2025. They exist in pieces across various premium platforms. In a concept with no constraints, they exist together, fully integrated, managed by a system that treats the vehicle as a responsive environment rather than a machine you operate. All right, here is my honest take. What this concept does genuinely well: the coherence of the design language is exceptional. From the hex emblem repeated across front fascia, side body, and wheel centers, to the two-tone surface strategy, to the lighting signature, every element is part of the same visual argument. This does not feel like a render with details added until it looked impressive. It feels like a designer who started with a thesis and built every surface decision outward from it. That discipline is rare in AI concept work, and it earns genuine respect. What seems impractical? The approach and departure angles this stance creates are aggressive, but the body overhang at the rear concerns me. In a real-world build at this length and this wheel configuration, the rear overhang beyond the last axle would need to be carefully managed to avoid grounding on the very terrain the concept is designed for. The render does not give me a clear rear three-quarter view, and that is the one angle I would need to assess this properly. The absence of that view is a gap. The most impressive detail, the roofline step. The decision to raise ceiling height specifically over the habitable zones while maintaining a lower, more aggressive profile over the cockpit, that is not a styling decision. That is a function-first decision that also produces a better silhouette. When form and function align that precisely, it is worth pointing at. The one thing I would change, the forward visibility from the cockpit. The near-vertical windscreen that gives that aggressive front face also creates a significant glare problem in direct sun conditions. A slight backward rake, even 5 to 8 degrees, would dramatically improve driver comfort on long highway runs without materially compromising the visual identity of the front face. That is the change I would take to the designer first. What this signals about luxury mobility. This concept is part of a broader, accelerating shift in how extreme wealth relates to travel. The private jet as a status symbol is being quietly displaced by the idea of absolute terrain freedom. The ability to arrive somewhere no aircraft, no boat, no conventional vehicle can reach, and to do so in conditions that rival a five-star hotel. That is the new aspiration. This concept is a direct visual expression of that shift. It does not exist. It is fictional. It is AI-generated. And it is still one of the most resolved expedition motorhome concepts I have analyzed on this channel. Now here is my question for you, and I genuinely want to know where you land on this. Solar roof for extended off-grid self-sufficiency, or larger battery pack for longer range between charges? Which would you prioritize on a build like this? Drop your answer below. There is a real debate to be had there. If this kind of design analysis is what you come to YouTube for, the engineering logic behind the aesthetics, the functional thinking behind the visual decisions, then subscribing is simply the most efficient way to make sure you do not miss the next one. I will see you in the next breakdown.